Whoops, I'm doing it backwards. Good morning, everybody. I need to make sure I snap that into place. Welcome to Freeway Bible Study for the 22nd day of March 2018. This is Genesis 19. Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed. My name is Kurt Bell. I am your host of Freeway Bible Study. I live in Irvine, California. This is Irvine in the dark. Let me check the bike real quick. Packs are closed. Everything's good up here. Full a tank of gas. We're ready to go. I'm a non-believer. I don't believe the stories in the Bible, though I'm at least they're not the supernatural bits, right? I mean, I'm willing to believe the historical stuff. I'm willing to believe there was a guy named Abraham who had a house in Canaan in a place called Mamre, where there were some beautiful stately old oak trees, where he would like to sit there in the afternoon while his wife prepared, in the heat of the afternoon, while his wife prepared their lunch. Hold on, let me try to strap on. It's going to rain. We might hit some rain, so I need to strap up. Make sure that I'm well covered up. Here we go. Come on, snap. Hold on, I'm sorry. I have to take my gloves off real quick to snap this on. So I'm willing to believe those elements of it. I'm sure a lot of it is, distorted or changed over time, just like the stories that I tell my daughter from my childhood are not necessarily completely accurate representations of what happened in my youth and childhood. Here we go. Now we're ready to go. Sorry, I should have had that all together in the first place. And we are off. But I'm very curious. So I read the Bible every day, Monday through Friday. Beginning in the Old Testament with Genesis and working my way all the way through Revelation. A project that will probably take me upwards of 5 years to complete. Oh, and I just felt the first drop of water fall down. And if it does start raining in earnest, everybody, I'll have to cut this video short and pull over because although my camera on the top of my helmet that I'm using right now, my GoPro, is waterproof, it's only waterproof if the side port is closed, which it is not, because that's how I am able to capture my voice recording, because I've got a little dongle thing that connects off the side and then comes down to comes down to the microphone in my helmet. So I have to pull over and pop that connection off and close the port. So I'll stop abruptly. So that's probably good, because although this is a gigantic chapter in terms of interest, it's one that may not require a lot of time to cover. Genesis 19. So again, we've been following the story of Abram for like the last 7 chapters or so, all the way for his journey. Abraham, of course, that becomes Abraham in 2 chapters ago, who was, of course, the patriarch of all patriarchs. Even more so, I think, than Moses. Or maybe, Adam's got to be the patriarch to end all patriarchs, of course, right? But you know what I mean. So anyway, in the last chapter, we meet God and 2 of his angels as they're talking to Abraham, who is taking a break outside of his house, and they have a nice chat, and God delivers for the 5th time, for the 4th and 5th time. No, that was in the previous chapter. They talk, and God reaffirms that he's going to have Abraham will have a son by Sarah, and there's a whole bit that goes on with Sarah's incredulity that she can't believe that's going to happen, and a little interesting back and forth between she and God. But anyway, so now as they're at the end of that chapter, God dispatches. He tells Abraham about his concerns for Sodom and Gomorrah. That word has come to him that there's a lot of evil going on there. Never mind that God should be omniscient and know everything, but anyway, he's decided to come down and check it out for himself. So he sends his emissaries, the 2 angels, to Sodom and Gomorrah to check it out. And then there's an interesting bargaining that happens between Abraham and God, where God, almost like an auctioneer, who will give me 50, who will give me 50, 45, okay, but it's a reverse, it's going down, as he's trying to convince God, will you destroy both cities if you find 50 righteous among them? And God agrees, no, I will save the cities for 50. And then Abraham tries his luck a little further and says, how about if there's just five short? What if it just comes up 45? Will you destroy it for that? And God says, no, I will destroy it for 45. God acquiesces to each of Abraham's request for mercy on the part of the Sodomites and the Gomorrahites, or whatever they're called. And probably he's doing this because Lot is there. He knows Lot's there. He wants to save the family. He gets him all the way down to 10, and God agrees it's 10. Abraham says, I'm not going to try my luck any further. He didn't say that, but he said one last question, and then he shoots for the 10. God agrees, and God leaves. So that's where Genesis 18 ends. And in 19, we pick up with the two angels who are kind of, I guess, they're slumming it in the form of men. Well, I guess that we would look like them, right? Because in Genesis, God created man in the image of himself, and I guess he's created angels likewise. So the two angel men appear, and guess who happens to be sitting in front of the gates of Sodom? It happens to be Lot, which is an interesting thing. I wonder what he's doing out there, given that he's clearly a wealthy man. Now he's got a house in Sodom. He came back from Egypt rich, and he must have done well for the fact that he's the nephew of the great man Abram, who was the liberator of Sodom. I mean, everybody should have revered Abraham and his family. But we're going to see in a minute that the folks of Sodom, the men in particular, have different views on that. So he meets the angels and says, "My lords," and he bows his head to them. "My lords, please enter and spend it's the evening, right? So spend the night with me. Come into my home." And the men say, no, I think we're just going to hang out in the street all night. I'm paraphrasing, of course, sorry. We're going to hang out, and I think because they're there to, reconnoiter the city, to see how evil it is. And what better time to do that than in the evening, of course, right? So they're there to do some work. But Lot, I guess he knows how bad things are, so he, implores them, no, please, come and do it. And maybe that's just a formality, like in Japan, it was a formality for, Japanese housewives to offer food multiple times, and you have to kind of turn it down a couple of times before you say yes. I went through a lot of hungry no, that was a different story. But anyway, that was kind of, protocol. So after a second time, the angels agree, and they come into the city, and they're following Lot, and they must have made quite a sight. I imagine that they were pretty beautiful to look upon. And they get to Lot's house, and they go inside, and they have a feast. Now everybody in the city must have noticed that they had arrived, because they're talking about them, words getting out, and they're having the feast inside, and there's Lot, and he's got his wife, we don't know her name, and he's got his two daughters, and I can't remember if we catch their names. I don't think so. We learn the names of their sons later, one of which is Moab. I can't remember the other one, but I'm getting way ahead of myself. Anyway, it appears there's also two other men who are, footnote, underline, the daughter's husbands. Okay, put a pin in that, right? Okay. So they have a feast, and bang, bang, bang on the door, Lot goes to the door, and it's the men of the city, young and old, who have gathered outside and who entreat Lot to put out the two men that have come into his house, that they, in the words of the King James edition, that we might know them. We all know what that means, right? Yeah. So, they're going to gang rape these two men. I mean, and there's all the men. It says all the men of the city are there. Now that's going to be a pretty wild and terrible night, right? So the men are back there behind the door, I imagine, or maybe further in the house, so they can overhear everything. And Lot says, "Oh no, you don't. Why would you want to do this? And don't even think about it." And he's, instead of just refusing them outright, maybe he's in a bit of a bind, because they're standing right there and they can come in if they want to. They're a mob after all. He says, instead, why don't you take my two daughters who are virgins and haven't known men? Okay, but let's go back and unpop that pin off we put in earlier. Virgins? But aren't they married? Well, I guess I'm being presumptuous to assume that most young men aren't eager to do one thing and one thing predominantly on their wedding night. Maybe things were different back in the age of the patriarchs. I mean, we know later that Mary was married to Joseph, and she was a virgin. So maybe it's the same kind of deal. Maybe there was some dealy thing that, you know, you get married and don't consummate the marriage for, you know, a year just in case, you know, you're the one, or something happens or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, and I'm sorry I'm being flippant and I'm being fast because I'm worried about the rain starting, and I hate to do this on a big important chapter like this. But he offers his daughters to the mob. Now, as you guys know, I read, and maybe you don't if you're just seeing this for the first time, I read the Bible at least each chapter at least 5 times before I do this. And every time I read it and I came to that part, it just sunk in deeper and deeper, you know, and especially because I'm a father of a daughter, a teenage daughter no less, I just couldn't imagine that. I was trying to picture in my mind any circumstance in which I would offer, and it's just hard for me even to say the words, offer my daughter to a mob outside our apartment door. And then it kind of dawned on me that, you know, I thought about not so much with Christians, Jews or Mormons, but with Muslims in particular, the practice of honor killing. Well, where fathers will murder their daughters. This is a contemporary practice, you know, albeit hopefully not a very common one, but they will murder their daughters for the honor of the family. You know, if some slight is perceived, if she does something bad, you know, maybe has sex, or I don't know, you know, drives a car or whatever. Oh, you know, like some things like, destroying, damaging a Quran or whatever. I'm not very good at what the offenses are, but in some cases, something happens, and the father decides that his family has been, their good name has been slighted in such a way that the only recourse to recover their honor is to kill the offender, who happens to be his daughter. And I mean, you can read about the instances right and left. I mean, the one that stands out, that pops, and I'll just give you one instance. The one that pops into mind is the father. This was about 5 years back that I remember, that, you know, picked his daughter up and wrapped her in a bed sheet and went out and walked into the pool with her and submerged her under the water until she was dead. And that was for one of these offenses. So there we go. There's a contemporary example of a man with no different than me choosing to offer his daughter as nothing less than a sacrifice in penance for a perceived religious offense. And maybe this was with Lot. Maybe it wasn't even a religious offense. It was more of a breach of cultural etiquette. Maybe when a stranger enters the house, it's your duty to protect them at all costs, even to lay your life down. Now, if that's the case, if that was the mindset of the people of Sodom, well, then that says a lot. That's interesting. And then I'm not trying to excuse it, but that may help me to understand it. And I made a mistake of posting this this aha moment on Facebook last night, and several people got the impression that I was endorsing, or 2 people got the impression that I was condoning the behavior or like accepting of it. No, I wasn't. I was simply trying to say that I could understand. The key word is the rationale. I felt like I had unraveled the rationale behind the action. Although I find the action to be abhorrent, and I find the rationale to be faulty at best, and evil at worst. So there we go. So Lot is offering his virgin daughters, who are married to 2 guys who happen to be in the house, up to the rape bottom. What are those 2 guys going to have to say about it? Well, maybe you can kind of get the impression that they're somewhere back in the deep end of the house, maybe even asleep, and maybe they don't even know. And the 2 men at that moment the 2 angels intervene by, you know, stepping. And by the way, we will see this happen again elsewhere in the Bible, where the daughters will be offered up again, almost in an identical story. I can't remember which book of the Bible it was, But in that case, the daughters. Oh, it wasn't a daughter's. It was I can't remember. It wasn't a daughter's. It was a slave girl and a daughter. It was a daughter and a slave girl, and the daughter wound up. It was an almost identical situation, and the daughter wound up getting fed to the mob, who raped her until dawn, and then when the man who had done this, who was one of the biblical big shots, when he did this and he went out and he found her, she was just ravaged on the stone stoop of the house. She'd just been just horrible things had happened to her all night, and he basically said, "Get up, let's go." She tried to get up and she fell down and died. And then to make matters worse, he took a knife or something like that and cut her up into all kinds of pieces, and sent with runners or something, a piece to all the land of the various tribes of Israel, basically to summon them all to war. The story's coming back to me, but it was like an offense. They had done this, but there's another example. In that case, the slave girl got no reprieve. And no, she wasn't a slave girl. She was a concubine, and therefore she was kind of like his wife junior. And I wish I could remember who this was, but it's later. We're going to run across this in the Old Testament again. So we've seen this story again with a less happy ending. Well, not that this has a very happy ending either. So in this case, the two virgin daughters are granted reprieve by the angels, who suddenly pull Lot back in, slam the door shut, and as the men hound the door, wanting to push it down, the angels strike them with blindness, great and small. I guess that means to various degrees. Some of them could see a little bit, some of them are outright blind, but they were banging around out there doing all that, and so they couldn't see, they couldn't find the door. And then the angels turn to Lot and say, they've made their mind up, or they've communicated, maybe they've got like a backside connection with God, and God's made his mind up. And they say to him, gather your household, gather your people, and leave in the morning, for we are going to destroy this place, which is God's plan. But we will save you and whatever you, your wife, and your daughters, and your daughters' husbands, and whatever. I think he includes the husbands as well. Yeah, he does. The angels do. And whatever you can carry. And they all go to bed. I wouldn't realize that until I read it a couple of times. It sounds like they didn't just all hastily gather and leave. They all go to bed. But before they go to bed, remember, all the mob outside is still stumbling around blind, so they can't even find their way to the door. Lot goes to the two sons-in-law, wakes them up, and tells them, make haste, we're leaving in the morning. And I couldn't quite get why they didn't take him seriously, but they didn't take him seriously, and they went back to sleep. And they ended up not going. So, and I'm still, that's a mystery to me. I can't quite remember why, and it really doesn't matter, right? But I'm curious, so I'll probably look into it a little more this evening. So they're asleep, and when they wake up in the morning, the angels say, get out, we can't start our business until you go. So Lot gathers his wife and his daughters. The sons have refused to come, the sons-in-law have refused to come, and they head out, and the angels say, go far. I imagine they're standing just outside the gates of Sodom now, and they're saying, go far, go into the mountains. And Lot's like, but I don't want to go into the mountains, there's nothing up there. How about that little village over there? It's like I think they describe it as a small city. How about that one over there? Can I just go over there? You guys maybe spare that, and then I'll have, a roof over my head. I won't have to start over with sticks and rocks. And the angels say, yeah, okay, go on over there. So they go on over there, but they say, tell them, don't turn around once the fireworks start. Don't turn around and have a look. We don't want you to see what we're gonna do. So they start heading off toward that little, village/town. And the destruction begins, right? And I can just imagine they could hear the sounds as they're walking. Lot and his wife and two daughters are walking away. They can hear the sounds of the fire and brimstone raining from the sky, the screams, the fire, the crackling of the wood. The destruction is underway, including the two sons-in-law. And Lot's wife can't resist, and she turns around and takes a look, and in an instant is turned into a pillar of salt. which seems like an interesting one. That must have been, I can just imagine, because I don't believe that any of this was divinely inspired. I believe this was written of men, making stories to explain their circumstance. Almost reverse engineering history, largely probably to make good reason for their subjugation of the lands of the people with whom they've taken over, namely the Canaanites, right? So a lot of this is setting the stage for to justify that the two sons of Noah, Shem and Japheth, can have dominion over their cursed brothers' descendants, Ham. Remember the curse that Noah laid upon not Ham himself for his offense, but upon Ham's son Canaan. And I think a lot of this is just, making excuses for that, because they're living in a time when they're living in the Canaanites' land, maybe keeping the Canaanites as slaves in some cases, and they need a good reason to justify that. To say, well, you remember back in the age, your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather's Ham's offense brought this curse upon you, that you would be servants unto servants. That's why you serve the house of Japheth, and who in turn will serve the house of Shem. There you go. So if they're doing that, and they're just a couple of guys writing a story, so they're going to say, imagine it's like, what are those two guys that write all those musicals? I can't remember, but there's two guys that are famous for doing it. They do it as a team, and one of them must have turned to the other, and they said, okay, what are we going to do when Lot's wife turns and looks at the descending of the descent of the fire and brimstone, and the other guy says, she dies instantly, and then the other one says, no, she burns up in a moment, or her eyes go, wax over with the whites of the eyes, and then she's stricken and she screams as earth opens up and swallows her. I'm picturing all kinds of things, like in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the Nazis took a look inside the Ark, right? What happened to them? And the one guy says, I got it. She turns into a pillar of salt. And the other guy's looking at her going, what? Where'd you come up with that? But somehow it got stuck. It made a lot of sense. And maybe that makes sense because salt is, if we understand what salt meant to those people, being a rare commodity perhaps, right? Maybe a little bit expensive, and certainly a symbol of purification. Maybe she was purified in an instant for her trespass on God's will. I don't know. So we have to rely on Bible scholars to come up with, dare I say, make up their best excuses. If it sounds like I'm being a little bit hard in this chapter, it's just deliberate. It's hard for me not to conceal my upset at this chapter, which seems to be full of reasons to close the entire Bible and never open it again. And I actually posed that question to my Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and Mormon friends on Facebook, asking them, how did you get past this chapter? Because you're believers, you've probably read this chapter before, you've encountered this problem, and it's the kind of thing that makes you go, what did you do at that time that allows you to continue further? And this must be a settled question. This is the type of thing that my believer friends shouldn't have to think about it, because they've already, overcome this hurdle. And it'd be interesting to see what they say. I saw two responses so far. One was to read Revelation, which seemed to just basically point away from the chapter, and the second one was to just not stop reading the Bible altogether. And that suggestion came from a Catholic of all people. Interesting. Anyway, let's continue. I see the first drops of rain, so I'm going to have to move quick. And I'm sorry I'm speaking fast also for that same reason. So Lot's wife turns into a pillar of salt, and Lot and his daughters continue on to that little town, but now Sodom and Gomorrah are utterly destroyed, and Lot, after a while, he's not feeling too comfy with that little place, right? It turns out it's not quite what he expected it to be. So he decides maybe the mountains aren't so bad after all. So he takes his daughters and he takes them up into the mountains, I guess to a cave, I think it is, and sets up a house up there. Now the daughters aren't too happy with this. I guess they're, the domestic arrangements are scarce and sparse, but the main problem they have is there's no men, and they're concerned with it. They specifically say they want to be able to preserve the seed of their fathers. Now I can make disparaging comments about what their real motivation may have been, which may have caused me to bring into question the topic of their virginity earlier on, especially given the fact that they were married. But we won't go there. So let's just say that the two sisters get together and they're talking, and they decide. I think it's the older sister's the ringleader here. She says, "Let's give our father drink tonight, that we may go in unto him." Well, no, they don't say that. That we may go to him and lay with him, that we may preserve, again, as I said, his seed for the future. Because they said they say they complain, there's no men to do unto us as in the way of nature, or something like that. It's kind of a poetic way of saying it. So they do that. They give Lot some booze. He doesn't pass out, but he's drunk enough not to know what's going on or what's happening. And the older daughter slips in, I guess, under the cover of dark, and they have, make whoopee. And then the next day, they're talking, the two daughters are talking again and say, "Let's do that again, but this time you, the younger daughter, can go in and do your thing." And that's exactly what happens. And the result is that the two daughters are pregnant with Lot's, they become pregnant with Lot's grandson kids? What do you call that? What do you call it? The results of an incestuous relationship between a father and his daughters, which kind of, hold on. Sorry, I had to get sick a little bit in my mouth, because as the father of a daughter, the very concept causes me to throw up a little in my mouth. So what do you make of that? What are those called? They're going to have two boy childs. They're not sons. They're not grandsons. They're sons and they're grandson sons or something. I don't know. And these are the people that God saved. Remember, Abram made that pact with the Lord that if there we could find 10 righteous in all of Sodom and Gomorrah, that they would save the city. Now, it doesn't seem like the angels had any time to give Sodom and Gomorrah a good look-see, because they just went straight from the gates to Lot's house, and all they saw were the mad mobs outside. But hey, we've got God's omniscience to consider, so maybe he just knew. And he says in this chapter that he saves Lot and his wife and daughters for the sake of Abram's the promise that God made to Abram. But these are the righteous ones, the guy that would throw his daughters to the mob. Well, maybe we've already explained that one away. And the daughters who would sleep with their father, knowing that it's a wrong thing to do by virtue of the fact that they choose to get him drunk first so that he won't know what he's doing. Wow, there's nobody more righteous than that. And this is the patriarch, one of the patriarchs. Interesting. Yeah, it's starting to think that the books on the New York Times bestseller list, even the ones at the bottom of the list, are starting to look a little more appealing to spend my time reading than to continue reading the Bible. And I know that Christians might be feeling a little frustrated at this point, in particular Christians. I don't know how Jews can get past this. Christians and Muslims and Mormons all might be feeling a little frustrated. And coming back to that one guy that responded to my comment on Facebook, that's David, I think. David said, just skip ahead to Revelation. Just read Revelation. And I'll bet you that if contemporary Christians, Mormons, and I don't know, I can't know if I can say Muslims, could have their way, and they could redo the Council of Nicaea again, where they decided what books would make it into the canon and what the order would be, that they would flip the order around, open with the New Testament, and then have the Old Testament as rather a set of footnotes. I'm sure, because then I'd be in the Gospels right now, right? I wouldn't be slogging it out in Genesis, which is a nasty place, and it's just going to get nastier. I wouldn't be in the quicksand, the bog and swamp of Genesis. I'd be in the Gospels. I'd probably be, finished with Matthew, maybe, some way into Mark already, and I would have already seen, the works of Jesus and the promise of everlasting life and salvation. But I've read all that too, so, I've already got that context. And just pointing away from, holding your nose and pointing away from Genesis 19 towards Revelation seems to be dodging the point. So when the comment that I made on Facebook was, I was asking my believer friends to tell me how they got past this point, especially, and retained their respect for God, because I'm not finding this God to be a particularly inspiring God at this point, especially after the flood. And if this is one of those chapters, Genesis 19, where if I learn in the process of this Bible study, or something else happens, that I learned that Yahweh is real and there's the one true God, I would most likely reject him on grounds of citing things like Genesis 19 and the flood and the upcoming incidents with Japheth, and just the list can go on, and not above all, the whole thing with Jesus, where it just gets, in my mind, it just gets worse in the New Testament, because at least in the Old Testament, when you die, you're done with. You go sleep with the Father. In the New Testament, you go to hell for the punishment of not suspending your critical faculties in favor of what appears to me to be nearly blind obedience, or faith in the absence of evidence, because faith is, as they say, the evidence of things unseen. So anyway, I'm way off tangent, but that's what this chapter and others like this do to me and to skeptics like me. We are incapable of sliding past this. This can't be a pass-through chapter. This is a make or break chapter. Or if it's not certainly not a make chapter, but if it's not a break chapter of its own right, it is a serious blow to the case being made in the Bible, towards getting us to accept, if not believe in the existence of the God, to accept that God is our Savior. So I'm curious how believers overcame that seemingly insurmountable hurdle, which is as it appears to me. So anyway, I'm really long-winded on this. Let's get back on topic. So the girls are pregnant. They're going to have a couple of sons. I think the oldest, his name is going to be Moab. So he will be the leader of the Moabites, of course. And the other one's got kind of one of those, two-word names, two things, and I can't remember what it is. And that's where the chapter ends. So we've got the girls are with child. Lot is going to wake up with a hangover and discover that he's going to be a grandfather. And I guess that he may not have any idea what's going on, because just up until recently, his daughters were married. Although he might be a little bit scratching his head because he thought that they were virgins. But I guess we can let that pass. So there we go, Genesis 19, the destruction. Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. Thank you for joining me for another Freeway Bible study. I'm sorry this was so long. I did get off topic a few times, but this was a really interesting chapter and very enjoyable. I really enjoyed reading and thinking about this, and I will be thinking about this, and I have thought about this a lot in the past. And I have a feeling it's just gonna get more and more interesting as we go. I mean, we're not even through Genesis yet, and we're already hitting upon existential threats to the claims of God's existence and preeminence, and a reason to believe, to accept Him as a personal God and Savior. Well, Savior, save the Savior part for Jesus. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a great day, and make it a good life. Take care. Bye-bye.